Welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show with Harrison Wright, a podcast dedicated to dauntless blockchain leaders building our new decentralized future. You'll hear stories, successes, trials, and tribulations as we channel into the lives of high-performing leaders in crypto and Web3. Whether you're currently a Web3 founder or leader, or you one day aspire to be, you'll gain crucial knowledge and insights to accelerate your learning curve, handle this industry's greatest challenges, and make the impact you've always dreamed of.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show. This is your host, Harrison Wright. I'm delighted to welcome you back for another episode. Today, I'm really excited to have on the show Gwen Scott. Gwin is co-founder of Vendible Labs, a decentralized identity and privacy company. One of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to Gwin is he's one of the most experienced founders and executives I've ever spoken to in crypto. And if you've been reading any of what I put out for any period of time, you'll know that I believe we need a lot stronger depth and context of leadership experience in the space. So I'm really excited to get Gwen's perspective here. Gwen, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Harrison. Appreciate it. I'm excited to be on and grateful to of our relationship and sharing some stories.
I'm looking forward to diving into those. And I guess we can just dive right in. And speaking of stories, I'd love if you could give a little potted history of your career and how you came to be in crypto.
Yeah, that sounds great. Certainly. I guess I've been in the blockchain crypto space. It's been about 4.5, 5 years now. I'm also an investor in a company that's in the e-commerce fraud space, and there's a lot of similarities, in that, and with blockchain and crypto as well. But it was really just through some Memphis connections. I'm based in Memphis and Tennessee, and meeting a co-founder and deciding to launch the company and to really provide some extra depth of responsibilities that wasn't being addressed. And before that, it was really a combination of corporate America, Time Warner Turner Broadcasting, global experience on the P&L side, living in Southeast Asia, and co-founder of a StartCo, of an accelerator, and have been in a lot of other little early stage ventures to complement that.
If I remember rightly, you found yourself in many emerging industries, right at the similar sort of stage that crypto's been at these past few years.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, being in a nascent stage with all this, because versus wanting more growth or scale up. But I just like, I like these stages and everything, and I like kind of where things are going. And yeah, there's uncertainty, and yes, my wife would much rather me work for, a corporate America, but I choose this because it's exciting and there's never a dull moment.
Well, I was on that. I was going to ask you about that. What actually, just for context, for clarity, how many industries have you worked in now?
I guess it's been probably 4 to 5. I mean, some of them have overlapped because Turner Broadcasting, and then iBeam. Those are that streaming bled into cable and broadcasting. So in a way it was one, but then it became bigger as other companies, Netflix and all those in streaming video providers grew. It became one. And then the accelerator incubator world is kind of a proliferation of a lot of different industries, isn't it? So it kind of bled into SaaS and tech and high growth and healthcare and all that. So it's been really probably more like 4, I guess.
Well, let me ask you this. Given that context, how is Web3 as an industry different? Now, let me make that a more specific question. From the perspective of the success conditions for business execution, what's different about Web3?
Well, I think with Web3, there's obviously not as much maturity. There's no, we don't have any real trends that of success that has happened. There's definitely more unknowns, out there in blockchain and Web3, such as regulatory and others. I think there's a serious gap and weakness in like what the go-to-market strategies are and revenue strategies and how you're really creating business modeling. And but that's an opportunity as well. I think you also have to do a lot more due diligence in crypto and blockchain with things that like you do, making sure that that people that you're working with are legitimate and they've got great backgrounds and all that. Because with some, you don't know who you're talking to, you don't know what their names are. So there's a vast, there's definitely a lot of differences. There's obviously a whole level of versatility and resilience that's needed. Now that's needed everywhere. I know that's kind of generic, but you need it especially in this space, and just not be set on any one course. But those are a couple observations on the differences, of what I've learned. Obviously, everything is all kind of entrepreneurial anyway, so it's all correlated. But there are things to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. What about from the perspective of, you're a commercial guy by trade, so am I. A lot of people in crypto business development and marketing will tell you, oh, you can't do business development in crypto like you do in other industries. Crypto's different. I have my own thoughts about that, but I'm curious about yours. Do you agree with that, or do you think that's overblown?
I think, there's definitely some foundational similarities. And if you're successful in an early stage SaaS company, or if you're successful even in I don't want to say a corporate environment, that you can certainly make it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of differences. I mean, there's obviously a greater focus on community and making sure there's a lot of contentment there. Obviously, with groups like DAOs, you don't Turner Broadcasting or iBeam didn't have a DAO. You just had a management team, and you just go execute and deliver. But there's a lot more sensitivities to the community and other groups that you're working with. So, one size really doesn't fit all, does it? If you're working for an early stage company versus a more mature company, versus a company that's valued at 10 billion, you're going to have different different strengths and weaknesses on what you look for. But at the foundational level, yes, you should have, if something's working in Web 2 at the start, it should work in Web 3 if you're an entrepreneur.
The interesting thing about this is, this wasn't part of my plan for this conversation. I don't want to get too far off topic, but I think there's an interesting thread to be pulled at here. If you look at how the sort of sales and marketing experience is changing in other industries, there's a lot of similarities with some of the things that are natural about how people approach things in crypto. So, for example, I keep a lot of tabs on the B2B sales world in general, and I'm always a fan of, and this could be something else we could talk about later, but I've been a recruiter most of my career, for example, but before I started this company, I spent 3 to 4 years working in a marketing agency doing enterprise sales. I learned more about recruiting from doing that than I would have learned by doing 3 or 4 years more recruiting. I think there's a lot to be said for pulling ideas from different industries and taking the sort of best practices from a variety of places. So, but I'm looking at how sales and marketing is done in other industries, and things are increasingly moving to the community model everywhere. If you follow the big sales people on LinkedIn now, they're all talking about, outbound sales is getting harder, and we need to build communities. And there's the big trend at the moment is what they call inbound led outbound. So you're still doing outbound approaches, but instead of, hey, buy my stuff, or let's have a meeting, it's, hey, join my free community to get my lead magnet, come and be part of a group, and then they pull their clients from that community that they build. And the execution is different. They're not sitting on Discord usually, or on Telegram or what have you, and they don't have tokens. But I think a lot of the principles are the same. So it's interesting because it could just be that crypto's a few years ahead of the curve when it comes to certain things.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, if you, and by the way, your role in your enterprise sales role, I mean, I know that was great experience, but working for somebody else, it probably got you more excited to be an entrepreneur where you're controlling your destiny, you're controlling outcome, you're controlling results. And yeah, I got a whole methodology behind it. I mean, enterprise sales overall in Web 2 is tough. The sales cycles are longer. you have to really make sure that you understand pipeline development. You have to make sure you understand, the cost of customer acquisition and everything. But no, you're right. I think that we're kind of lucky, because if you're starting a company, you can go to your community and you can launch your product, that way. I get really frustrated. I do like the word MVP, but I don't like that word, because there's so many people in the blockchain space that are building something, but they don't really have a customer base, and that's extremely frustrating. I mean, we've certainly done that, and I've seen it firsthand. And it's almost like, as Noah Kagan, says, create that minimal viable customer, because and that customer could be a group, it could be L1s, it could be L2s, it could be a community, but find where you have true utility and let that be your baseline, and that's your sales pipeline, and that's your sales tool, and it's immediate too. So I think that's a great way to to launch your product, and not just letting it be about the tech. You've got to do that mutual build and get build buy-in.
Yeah, and I've noticed this very interesting trend, which I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this on other podcast episodes, because it's just something that I go back to frequently in conversation, is that there are certain projects out there that have raised way too much money, and they all seem to. I'm not going to name names. Maybe I should, but I just don't feel like naming names on this particular occasion.
You might be working with them.
No, but there are orgs out there that they had a huge ICO back when ICOs were a thing, or they raised huge amounts of money. They've got these massive treasuries, and I'm not sure what they still employ dozens or even over 100 people in some cases. But I'm not sure what they do. They never seem to produce anything. It feels like they've devolved into being a jobs program instead of a company. And it's fascinating. I think there's this necessity of having constraints to produce the right kind of innovation. If you just get a completely free rein, untethered from market forces, where's the incentive to get that product market fit?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. There is the accountability factor has got to be there on making sure that every employee is valuable, every employee is pulling their weight, because it's not going to be like this. And if they're not, then there's going to be a bad outcome. And I think that as leaders, we all have to be self-aware of what that production is. And I think it's, I know we'll get to these questions also, but I think it's good to be lean. And it's great to go fast, but I think you can go slow and then speed up as you get traction. But just hiring, tens and 50 and 100 people without having a real sense of purpose and mission and result, then I think that's just, you're burning too much capital.
100%. There was, that's one key question that I have for you. If we're speaking to other crypto founders, maybe founders who haven't necessarily had the extensive business experience you've had outside of the space, what do you think are the key things you've seen that crypto founders miss, that they dismiss from the wider business world, but actually they should be taking on board?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I mean, I think that there's a lot of founders and co-founders that are engineers, and they really focus about their bright, shiny code that they have, and and they're really pushing the tech harder and harder, but there's no real utility for it. And I think there needs to be a greater awareness of what you're building to make sure it has utility and everyday usage. And I think that there's not that great of an awareness of that. And I don't know if that just comes with making sure that one of the co-founders has more of a growth external mindset on questioning everything you're building to make sure there's applicability to the market, and making sure that there's no lack of understanding on lack of direction. So I've seen that a lot, as you probably have as well, on that. And I've seen others that are just doing other stuff, that just want to have liquidity events and token launches and and getting in and getting out. And you want to try to have a longer term mindset with everything, and building right relationships. I mean, the Turner and the Web 2 world taught me the value of relationships, because you want to work with the right people. You want to make sure that they're helping you scale up. But yeah, those are a couple observations that I've seen.
It's funny. You remind me of a little anecdote some years back. Well, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was talking to one of my clients, and I was advising him on what he should be sure to convey in the interview to ensure the person he was interviewing would be interested in the job. And he kind of metaphorically turned around. He had this big sigh. So, I feel like all I do these days is I'm just a salesman. What happened to being an engineer? Yes, that is your job as a founder. You are the salesman. That's your job now, among other things.
Yeah. And, co-founders and really everybody in the company has got to be a salesperson. And I've seen mistakes being made on that I would certainly tell any entrepreneurs today on everybody in the company has got to be, you don't want just some introvert that is in a dark room coding. That person needs to explain what he's doing to make sure that what he's working on has got relevance and justifying, everything that's being done, not just being a grind machine pumping out code. Everybody's got to be a salesperson, and because you never know what perspectives people want. A venture person may want to talk to a developer that gives them certain things. A client may need want an engineering spin on certain things. So I think I'm come from that ilk, of course, with what you said, and I think that's an important way for the team to be able to to be externally facing and not just totally introverted.
It's the same way, and I'm at risk of getting totally off topic here again, but I was talking to someone yesterday that actually embodies this, and I really appreciate it when I see it. The engineers that understand the wider context of what they're building.
Yeah.
They're not just, hey, I write code. I want to write the best possible code. They understand the business picture. Okay, what are we building this for? How is the user going to use this? How is this going to drive business growth? It's very difficult to teach that, but it's very important to have it.
Yeah. You have to show them, I think, that this is, you have to create the expectation that this is a weekly thing that we want to be doing. And if it's not yielding the right fruit, then you need to pivot. But yeah, I think that's an important leadership tip too.
Definitely. So let's talk about Vendible. I mean, as it sounds like it's been a hell of a journey these past few years.
Yeah, I can go in a lot of different directions there. Do you want me to hone on anything specifically that your audience would be interested in, or I can kind of tell you sort of the good and then the challenges. But we can go a lot of different ways if you have 4 hours.
Well, I'm a big fan of that saying. What was it? That a smart man learns from his mistakes, and a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. And so there's been some things that have gone well, some things that have gone not so well. So I'm really curious about the lessons you've taken from that, and the advice you would have for yourself 4 years ago if you were starting again.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, a lot of it's a question of survivability. I mean, when we started 3-4 years ago, a lot of the companies aren't even around. They're just done. They either ran out of funds or they weren't building anything. And, but, I guess I would learn that, I wish that we'd probably, and the company is still around. We're just trying to figure out how to pivot and how to kind of, work on our own sustainability as entrepreneurs. And, but we did a good job of raising money. We really hired, pretty fast. We were up to 13 people pretty quickly. I think looking back on it, if you're asking 3 and 4 years ago, I probably would have raised some more money to have enough dry powder for 36 months to 30 months or so. I would have been more deliberate in our approach with our team and really been probably a little bit leaner. And I can understand other entrepreneurs' approach about going fast and building fast, and because the industry goes fast. But I would have just been a little bit, leaner, and then I would have been also just more deliberate about getting your product launched into Mainnet, and then also honed in our strategy a little bit more specifically, because what we were doing with this whole decentralized identity and seed phrase recovery and privacy and identity is a really huge goal. I mean, there's a lot of people trying to do it, and you got people like WorldCoin with their orb and everything that are trying to get through the whole identity piece. So the good thing about it is that there's a huge market need for it, but it's just a matter of how you solve it and how you identify people, and so that that every transaction is safe and secure. But so funding, team, getting to launch quicker on Mainnet, obviously building community is a continual thing, and then picking your partners, I think, is very important. We had one that we really like with Algorand, and their story is great. They help seeded us a grant, but they're a small community, and yes, our solutions are cross chain, but I wish that we got to a bigger community quicker, and we could go to any community as long as we can run a node. But there's bigger communities out there where our services could have been, and our community could be 10x larger, 20x, and I think that would have put us in kind of a better position to really get the traction that we needed. So those are 3 or 4 observations that I would have, that I would have kind of done things just a little bit differently. And I do think it is important to have a partner, because if you're in the trenches, you're not paying yourselves, it can be psychologically demoralizing. But yeah, maybe you have equity, maybe you have tokens, and maybe they're worth something. But having another team member, I think, is important, but you just need to make sure that you guys are complementing each other, in every way. And I think picking your co-founder is really important too.
Hey, I think all of those points you just raised is the perfect template for the things we should dig in and discuss for the rest of the episode, because I think this is going to be super, super valuable to people. Let's go with the topic of raising more funding first. It's one thing to say in hindsight, hey, it would have been great if we raised a little bit more money. But looking back, how would you know at the time to raise more money? What would you do differently to know that it would be a good idea to raise more than you did?
Yeah, the markets back then, it seems like they were easier to raise funds, and I would just rather have had a little bit. I mean, we don't have any security in anything we do in life and living, do we? But it would have been nice to have just a little bit more, to have more of a nest egg to work with operationally. You always need more money, no matter what anybody says, whether that's building a house, doing a renovation, building a business. There's always greater need than what you have budgeted or forecast. So I would have just put, I don't know, 50, 75% buffer on top of that with raising funds, so that that you will get to the stage of launch. I'm not necessarily saying that you'll get to the stage of cash flow positive, because generally you do one raise, then guess what? You do another raise, in 2 years or a year or 3 years or whatever. So depending on that, we could have raised more money to scale up. But you never know. But I think sometimes it's good to raise more. But let's say you had a product that you were raising funds, and you had really done a good job of just kind of organically growing it, and you had some traction, then you maybe raise less, you get it to market, you get revenues, and then you raise more soon thereafter, and then you really hyper growth and scale up. So you never really know, but I do think having, more of a cushion, and, not having a, whatever the burn rate was at the time, 80 to 100,000 on salaries. It just, it's a big number.
It is a big number. And so when you calculated how much you went to raise initially, how did that calculation come about? for context?
Yeah, we had some VCs that were interested in our model, and we didn't have a lead, which I don't know why you think you really need to have a lead, but we had good relationships we developed through going to shows and people that we knew and referrals, and they each put in their respected amounts, anywhere from 250 to 600. So they liked our mission, they liked the tech behind what we were doing, and yeah, and we just kind of went with that, and it just felt right. It was more of a gut thing, but you just kind of reverse engineer it. And okay, in 2 years, we'd like to be at X number of employees, 10 or 13 employees, each making this. You need X developers, you need a front end, you need a back end, you need a cryptographer, you need community, you need maybe a business development or marketing. And then you just reverse engineer it, and then just say, okay, that'll give you 24 months. And but probably would have been a little bit more aggressive on that, just having enough dry powder.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Would you say, in a nutshell, your advice on this is to reverse engineer those calculations to get a number and a runway, and then add 50 to 70%?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Unless there's something that you have where you're getting quicker and immediate traction. And I'm talking about maybe you've got 5,000, 10,000 people, 20,000 that are using your product, and that in 6 months or 9 months that this is going to bring you X revenues. Then maybe you don't need to raise as much, because then that'll kind of alter the cap table and how that's impacting things. But but yeah, you need the capital to grow, of course, right?
That's really useful advice. I there's a couple little points I want to pick up on as well. Again, not getting too far off topic, but when you talk about burn rate, it is frightening how quickly burn rate can accumulate. Even even from personal experience, my little company, we don't have VC funding. We'll never have a need to have VC funding. Back in the 2021 bull market, we had a peak team of 4, and our burn rate got up to nearly 40 grand a month for a tiny little remote service company. You could point to me being too spendthrift, and you'd probably be right, but it just happens. And it's very important to keep a check of it. And I think I see founders go through the same thing. I know I did. I didn't appreciate the importance of financial management until I already got burned, and then I learned to do it.
Yeah, I think you do have to pay attention. You do have to be financially attuned. You've got to, your employees are most of those fundings, of course, but you've got to be aware of partnerships. And we had a couple partners that we needed to do some identity work. And some of those were just, the way that those deals were structured were just not conducive to an early stage company, because had you scaled up to, millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people, you'd be spending, hundreds and hundreds of thousands. So making sure that your partnerships and your service providers are aligned with you is also important, because expenses can get out of line, with those as well. And I know we've talked about this before. There's one company that has a lot of service providers out there that we've talked about, and maybe those can take the place of employees, too. So I think there's different ways to skin it. Obviously, when you're talking about how does the industry differ, there's also a lot of contractors in this space too, where, hey, let's bring on this person for X amount of time. And I think that's a smart strategy. And then you prove it out and let them do their work, and then you might have another need. So.
Yeah, 100%. And it kind of dovetails into the other thing I wanted to pick up on here, which is that you mentioned about raise more money than you think you need. And if you take a sort of 50,000 foot view and you look at why do most crypto companies fail, a lot of it is about not building the right thing at the right time, or not having a clear use case. But it's also just plain and simple running out of money. And I think I'm seeing it's developing a little differently this cycle, but in general, I'd say people have an astonishing capacity for collective amnesia on the nature of the market cycles in crypto. The bull market can never end until it does, and then the bear market's never going to end until suddenly it does. You can even see that people that should know better. Do you remember? It was either 2021 or 2022. Coinbase made this huge proclamation that they were going to hire 7,000 people next year. Right when you would know if you followed the historical cycles that the bear market's about to hit. Of course, it did hit. I think they got about 1,000 people through a hiring drive, and then they laid off pretty much the exact same number of people that they'd hired to begin with. And so how did they get that wrong? And I think people are being more judicious this time because so many people got burned by the last bear market appearing. I'm seeing a different sentiment now, but I think it's important to realize, hey, that funding environment when it's the beginning of a bull market and everyone's wanting to give you money, that's not necessarily going to be the case when you have to raise money again. It sounds like that was a stumbling block for Vendible as well.
Yeah, I mean that's why do early stage companies go out of business? What's the number one reason? It's funding. They run out of money, but it's also the product market fit and making sure you're getting utility and putting yourself in a position to succeed. Obviously, there's other factors, co-founder angst and disagreement and strategy and all that, but that's the number one reason. And I think you just have to you have to just make sure that everything you're doing it for the right reasons and the right cause. And I think that Coinbase one is a good example, but I think I would have waited that, when they hired all those people, waited to see what the market's doing, because you do want to build in a bear market. I think building in a bear market is where you want to be. And because if you can do it in a bear market, you can do it when things are in a great scenario. And there's a lot of companies that have launched in a bear market, Microsoft, CNN, there's a whole host of others that have launched in bear market times. So if you can do it in a bear market, you can do it if you're just being, if you're being wise and being smart. But yeah, funding is an important element to it for sure.
Something I've seen that's absolutely critical to succeeding in crypto, and this goes for individuals, employees, whatever term you want to use, and organizations, is you have to proactively, you have to be in charge of the cycles. You can't just react to whatever the cycle is doing. I'm seeing it again now. Bull market suddenly come back. People are shortcutting their hiring process. That, hey, we need to offer this guy the job right now, or someone else is going to come and offer the job. Well, so you're going to, the net effect of that is you're reducing your hiring standards to meet an urgency. Then you're going to sacrifice the quality of your organization. You're going to make these rash decisions. Then the bear market's going to hit. The people you have aren't going to be good enough to survive the bear market, so you're going to lay them all off. And then you just get this cycle. The people that do it well are the people that plan for these things in advance. And they don't end up having to lay off half their team in the bear market. They've got enough cash reserves to survive. They've got a bear and bull market approach that they follow, which keeps them thriving in both. So yeah, I don't want to go too deeply into that topic, but I think you can always test out people. Hey, here's a 3-month test. Let's see how you do. Do you like us? Do we like you? Are you producing? Is what you're doing of high quality? How do you work with the team culturally? So I think there's things you can do that are smart business decisions on the hiring front, because as you know, hiring the wrong person is a painful exercise for the company. Very much so. And the person. It's not doing anyone any favors to give them a job they're not capable of. Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And you've got to, when you're interviewing and when you're talking to various people, everybody is obviously on, and they're in their best behavior, and you need them on both fronts, on the purchaser and the seller, right? So you need to make sure that the hiring manager isn't overselling the role, and you need to make sure the employee is the right fit. And a lot of that comes with experience. A lot of that comes with referrals and just credibility. Absolutely. And this segues perfectly into the next point that you raised on things you do differently about being leaner. Tell me a little bit more about your experiences there. Yeah. I think that being lean until you see where things are going, and then you can scale quick and putting your foundation in place so that lean, and I know I'm talking about the lean startup methodology, which I like, but just going lean until you have something to show, until you have something that is of true
enterprise value that is going to add value to the company, add value to a user, and then you can scale quickly. But if you hire 20, 30 people and you still don't know where what your go-to-market strategy is or what your sector is, I think that's a tougher approach. But I think just being smart on, getting a core group of people, whether it's business development, growth, product, and engineering, and really just hammering it out and doing everything you can to show that, hey, this is valuable, this is a need. And then you just, you build and scale up accordingly from there. I think that makes, the most sense, just because it's the smartest. But then at the same time, once it hits, you've got to really, you got to you got to speedily move quickly to scale up, so you're not missing that scale up phase or growth phase.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's an element here of, and I'm looking back at some of my own mistakes as we're talking about this as well.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an element there of when you're in that pre-revenue stage and you're still dependent on funding, of treating expenses like it's always a bear market? The test is, do we really need this thing? Not, hey, that would be cool.
I think it's a cultural thing. I think being frugal and being Spartan-like is a good thing. There's a billionaire out there that I started a company called Dish, Dish Network, and Charlie Ergen, and he has a very, very successful company in the cable and media space, and he's still very frugal to this day. When you travel with people, you have to stay in the same hotel, in the same room, and everything. So I think culturally, being Spartan-like and frugal is a good thing on the things that are important, but certainly not being afraid to spend if you're going to get a 5 or 8x investment on that spend, and you have to. Mm-hmm. So I think culturally that being frugal and Spartan-like is the way to go, and I think it's something that all entrepreneurs need to be aware of. I think investors aren't micromanagers, hopefully not, but I think they would appreciate it, because that means you're extending the value of the dollar more.
Something I've learned is I when in the first couple of years of my company, and I know this is not exactly aligned because, again, we're not a VC funded company, we don't have the same sorts of expenses, but I was very spendthrift. And you'd see this cool piece of tech or something, hey, it's only $1,000 a month. That's nothing in the context of A, B, and C. Yeah, let's buy that. Soon enough, you have $4,000 or $5,000 a month expenses. Since I've learned to contextualize it in, what's this going to do to my runway? How many months can we survive without getting any new cash in the door? And how is this purchase going to affect that? So then okay, this is going to cost us half a month's runway. Is that worth it? That's been a much better litmus test for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, and I think you have to, because it's a real dollars and cents game on what's the impact. And if there's no revenues on the backside, then know that that's just potentially shortening everything, or it's going to make you have to go to market again, and with raising funds. But I think that's a very logical approach. And one of the things that we were worried about is on one of the service provider deals, as you scale up your user base in your community and those that are using your product, how that would impact your expenditures, because that was a big thing, because it's a kind of a cost of goods sold. And the more people you scale up, the more you're spending. Well, guess what? Those deals need to be reconfigured where it's not, you're not doing it on a per person basis, but there needs to be an extreme volume discount. So I think just being aware of that, because those expenses can get out of control, and they could kill the company.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories about surprise AWS bills.
Oh yeah. And why are they? You can check all that out real time. You should be paying attention, and if you're not, then get somebody else, or make sure that co-founders or founders are really directing that. Hey, we need to know all this. And that brought up, when you mentioned that, it brought up some of a quick case study with when I was with iBeam, where we would have all these people streaming video and audio. Well, guess what? We had to buy bandwidth, and we would do like an MTV Music Awards show or something, and your utility and your utilization goes up and it spikes up, and that could be a very costly thing. And you just have to be aware of it so that you've kind of not put yourself in greater risk. And that's just corporate responsibility, right? And financial responsibility.
Yeah, I think there's an element of things where people who are very sociable and gregarious, when they're new to this role of being in charge of these sorts of responsibilities, they want to get on with everyone, right? So maybe they don't want to go and hardball negotiate the contract with the vendor. But I think there comes a time in the business evolution when you realize that, hey, you might love the vendor. They might be great people. You might have a great time with them and all these things, but you need to go and hardball negotiate the contract because it's your responsibility for the survival of your project and stakeholders and investors and employees and everyone else that's riding on the six. Now, that doesn't mean, go and get ridiculous bargain basement rates for things that are not a commodity and, sacrifice the quality of it. But it just, you know what I'm driving at here.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to have those tough conversations. I kind of like them because, you're kind of challenged to one, make sure you've picked the right partner, because if you go into that and they're not open to it, then to me, that's not the right alignment, And I know the way that we were positioned is we're a startup, we're an early stage company. We don't have as much funding. Are you willing to work with that? Are you okay with that? And are you willing to offer X rates? And then they say, sure, we like you, we want to work with you. And it brings back another story during my Turner Sydney days where one of these vendors, and it was the Murdoch family. They really they needed our product, but we needed them as a distributor because we wanted to be distributed in Australia, and we were thinking about X price of 75 cents per subscriber they would pay us, and I think they were thinking more like 20 cents or 25, and that's a lot less. So guess what we did? We had to meet in the middle, but it was closer to them and on that price, and because we couldn't risk not being on that platform. So it was a give and take, and I guess it worked, but it was a long-term game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Thinking, is there anything else I want to ask you about that? But to me, yeah, the one other thing I wanted to ask you about this topic is, do you have a framework or a process that you deploy to just decide on whether to make an expenditure or not, or is it more of an art than a science?
Yeah, I think it's more of of an art than a science. I really do. I'm just trying to cite some examples, but I think it's just very situational. And yeah, there's a cost of doing business. I remember having a little bit of an argument. You may not like this story because it impacts people like you, but it was a few years ago. He wanted to use a recruiting firm to look at people, but we had a pipeline of somebody's in our network that we already had, and from people we knew. So that could have been an expense that we didn't need because we already had a couple good candidates from our own network, and just being aware of that. So yeah, I'm very aware of expenditures like that, and I think you really have to. Otherwise, it can get you in trouble. But if it's saving time and saving workload, then you've got to look at it. But yeah, as co-founders, you got to kind of mutually agree on things, right?
Yeah, I actually find, speaking of that, I don't know if you have the same thought, but for me, I find that a barbell approach to expenses is the best way. And now I think about it, I'm like that in personal life as well. There are certain things that are extremely important, and you should take the premium option on and spend very heavy. And there are other things you should do as cheaply as possible. Rarely is the right answer somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think on the personal side, you've got to pay your mortgage, but do you need $1,000 a car payment? No, you really don't. And you can negotiate anything. I have fun negotiating with some of these personal people because, you can beat them up. I mean, called AT&T, who provides cell service and cable and internet, and I wasn't happy with where they were, so they lowered my, and I'm a good paying customer. They lowered my rate, $60 a month, like a year or so ago. I wasn't happy. I love the Wall Street Journal, and that's the one thing I like, touching the paper. I know it's old school, but I wasn't happy with their monthly rate. It was like 60 a month, and they lowered it to 22. So yeah, I think there are must-haves, and there are things that you can get away with in the business world, and just being aware of it, and not blowing it out, I think is something that you just need to be shrewd about.
100%. I think that is very, very wise advice. So, next topic that you brought up from your list of things, advice to my younger self. You mentioned about a greater focus on getting to mainnet sooner.
Yeah, I think it just culturally, it's like Ted Turner said, that you could research and research and research on whether a program or content's going to work, but really you just have to launch it, and you just have to get it out there and to see what impact is being had, and who's watching it and everything, or who's buying into it. And I think with when you're in the product build mode, you can just spend a lot of time just building, when you really need to get to, your core thing is to get to like a test net, because guess what? Test net you can screw up, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and you could be in test net for as long as you wanted, and making sure the community has buy-in. But the ultimate goal is mainnet, because that means that what you're doing has got application, that people are willing to buy it. So and then there's other things depending on what you're doing. There's a security component that you have to have. You have to have cryptography that's got to be really, tight, because you want to make sure your tech is the right the right dev stack and flow and everything. So yeah, I think you just need to get it. There's enough time to build, but you just need to to get it out there. So I think just being more deliberate on what you're building to make sure it's got product and practical utility is certainly a note that I would be giving myself back when we were doing that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Do you think that before you've reached that mainnet launch, it's hard to get some of the feedback loops in place that you need?
No, that should be easy, because that's really a majority of the community, right? We would have, weekly Discord update sessions. You would get feedback on Discord a lot. So you should be getting some real life, hey, this looks good or this doesn't, from that. And then there's other partners you can test with too, if you've got good relationship with them, and you just need to get them to tell you that, hey, if you create this product, we will buy it, and we will use it. And that should all happen in the testnet phase. So combination of partnerships, whether it's DeFi or L1s or L2s or gaming or trade fee or whatever, or Lend fee type groups. There's you should know who is going to be buying it. So it should be an easy. And then if nobody's giving you advice or really responding, then you really don't have something of value, right?
But have you seen that there's a distinct difference in levels of proof between someone that says, hey, I like this, that's a good idea, and someone that's actually willing to put their money where their mouth is?
I think as you look at Discord or Twitter, you just have to be deliberate about it, and you just have to just be in a nice way, in a professional way. Is this a nice to have, or is this a must have for you? And if you know that it's maybe, then that's not a buying signal, is it? If you get somebody to commit to saying, yeah, that I would buy that, then those are the people that you want. And I think there's certain incentives you can provide. I mean, you can provide a lifetime value or lifetime discounts upon usage. You can give them incentives so that they would want to use it as well. So I think incentivization is very important too. But yeah, if you have nobody wants a nice to have scenario that you use once a year. I think you want to be, it should be a must-have.
I'm at risk of getting off topic again, but I think there's another sort of similarly related lesson in there, which is that if you look up the bull and bear market cycle, it's the same as the recession and normal. It's the same as the other business cycle, but just accelerated. But the companies that are building things that are a must-have, they're the ones that survive. Nice to haves only survive in up markets. You've seen a lot of that with the software space lately. We had outside of crypto, we had 10 plus years of constant up market. And there's always all these SaaS companies selling this tool and that tool, and none of them are. But hey, when times are good for so long, people will just buy a bunch of cool tools. But as soon as the market turns, they start looking at those tools and saying, okay, we don't need this, we don't need that, we don't need that. I think it's a painful lesson a lot of people learn.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there's one guy out there that I know a little bit, and he has a software company, Noah Kagan, AppSumo. So he has a team. They've got about 100 million in revenues. It's really a great story. He just launched a book that I helped. Just was part of the inner circle of group that were giving him feedback on it. But they just launched software, and if you're interested in another cooler version of Calendly, you go buy it. You can buy it, and guess what? It's yours forever. And they have all these, hey, here's a better version of Slack, and there's no monthly subscription, or there's no onboarding, fees like that. And I think that model has worked because they're constantly producing software. They're constantly producing new iterations of that software. But guess what? You buy it once and you own it, and that's your expense. I mean, that's your cost. And this is not a $10,000 or $20,000 expense. It's $1,000 or it's $250 or whatever. And I think that's just good business, good business practices too.
Yeah. 100%. I totally agree. And I'm going back to one of the other things that you picked up on about the importance of picking your partners. And so, something I find really interesting about crypto is there are actually people that will give the advice of say, hey, the thing you need to look for is vibes. That's actually some people's hiring advice as well. Oh, there's no process for this. You just need to check the vibes. And I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Not to say that there's no utility of vibes. Nobody wants to work with someone they dislike. Although sometimes working with someone you dislike might be the right option. I'm not going to say that's never a good idea. It can be, but you can't base a strategic plan of any kind of partnerships, whether it's hiring or B2B partnerships. Vibes is not the appropriate test. And I think I've seen a lot of inexperienced founders that, hey, they'll just gravitate towards this one thing. The marketing speaks well of it. So that, hey, let's chat to these guys. Yeah, let's do a partnership. And they're just kind of navigating the world based on their emotions in the moment. And I don't think that's the smartest way of going about it.
Yeah, isn't that just an immaturity kind of thing? And it goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning about having great leadership in Web3, about people who've been in the trenches, they understand it and they know it, versus going with this disoriented gut feeling. I'm okay with gut. I like gut and vibe. But there's got to be more substance behind it, and there's got to be more methodology. I mean, you do a great job with your performance, with the Adler approach and all that. I think that shows substance, that shows foundational depth. And I think that's very, very wise, because you really should be able to, you shouldn't leave an answer that hasn't been addressed. But I think gut is important. And I mean, I've been in a couple different founding situations, and the one now is we're about as different as it gets. I mean, introvert, extrovert, me, tech, product. I like doing more of the growth stuff, and I think that works well. But you want to make sure that anybody you work with that you like and you want to hang with, because you're spending all this time with them. There certainly can't be an ass factor where you don't like the person, but because you're in the trenches with them, and the relationship needs to work, and you're always going to have peaks and valleys, and it's how you handle the valleys that is important on how you react and how your decisions are made. So yeah, I think think you're correct in that assessment. But yeah, you got to pick the right one for sure.
I thought it was an interesting point you brought up as well about having the right co-founder because of the psychological toll it takes being a founder. And I think to an extent, it's something that's not appreciated enough. A lot of people will look at founders and they think, oh, how lucky is that guy